My entire journey with music began in the 8th grade.
Parents are missionaries, actually.
For me, I started playing drums in church when I was about 10, 11 years old.
Guy who was the worship leader for our youth, and he was only a junior in high school. And his name was Chad, and he gave me the opportunity to play with the band because he knew I just wanted to do it more than anything in the world. And that's where it all began for me. I remember playing, I was in the 8th grade, playing in front of the senior high youth group, and my legs shaking on the hi-hat. And I remember that all the way up to playing with Colton Dixon and the nerves I had with that, but it all had a root. And the main thing I learned from all of this was to use my drums as a servant to the Lord. And it was really cool starting in worship music because the spotlight wasn't on us, and that wasn't a distraction. And I think if it wasn't for that foundation, I would have used music in a very different way. Only because of those roots was I able to stay on the right path with the Lord and truly use it for His glory.
My parents really brought me into the ministry world, I guess. You could say, like, just full on. In Mexico is where I learned to play drums. It's crazy to think that if we hadn't moved to Mexico and my parents wouldn't have said yes to the calling of God, that my life would be completely different.
Well, I actually didn't really start necessarily playing with youth, which is where a lot of people in church probably started out playing at the youth group. I didn't really do that as much, but I actually was just thrown right into the main thing, and it was a little terrifying at first, but fortunately I had some older people around me, older musicians and people that mentored me, and which actually was great for later on in my life, because the things that I would get kind of mad when they would tell me when I was a teenager, later, now that I do this for a living, they've kind of paid off, so it kind of came full circle.
Back in the Old Testament, when the Levites were the one who led the tribe of Israel to worship before the Lord, that's who worship leaders are now today. We're all called to be worshipers. And those who are actually leading the congregation in worship, that's like the first introductory thing in any worship environment, where you go to God first through praise and song. And I think that is the opening of the heart to receive whatever teaching God has or anything else.
Worshiping God is surrendering yourself and completely answering His call, giving up everything that we've known in a worldly point of view and giving up for God's point of view. And I think that's what just worship is for me.
Worship for me is about a lot more than what we do when we're just on a stage. Well, it has a lot to do with just sensing needs around us and in people, and trying to help meet those needs, whether it be financially. Sometimes it could be buying a coffee for somebody. But I feel like all of those things are acts of worship because it brings glory to God, because people want to know why we would do something like that.
Modeling God's character and this from grace that's been put on you to then implement it and help others with the same thing. So all it is a modeling of Christ.
Leaders should be constantly in check with God and constantly, in His presence, just constantly just seeking His heart and directing the band, to see God's heart too. It's kind of like a teacher.
I think it's mentorship, like, or mentoring people, taking the time out with kids that are growing up, musicians, I should say, growing up, and helping to develop their craft.